Hello, everyone. I think we can get started. If we can go to the next slide. This is Sabrina Paganoni, and I'm speaking from the HEALEY Center for ALS at Mass General. I'm here with our patient navigation team member, Catherine Small, and also our administrative assistant, Jessie. Thank you so much for always organizing this webinar, which I know is really well received by the community, with many people watching it, following us live, but also watching the recording. So thank you, Catherine and Jessie, for making this possible. If we can go to the next slide. So today we are going to focus a little bit more on expanded access, and that's because many of you have asked us to cover expanded access. So to start, let me start by sharing what we're doing here with the platform trial and why we're doing a companion to the platform trial as an EAP companion to it. So first of all, the platform trial is a shared infrastructure that uses a common protocol to test drugs in a more efficient way. We gain a number of logistical, operational, scientific efficiencies by testing drugs under the same roof. So if you can keep clicking, you can see that we started in 2020 and continued to add drugs all through 2023. At this time, we're actively enrolling for regimens F and G, which are number 6 and 7 of our common infrastructure. And by doing that, we can really make the best use of time and resources, and we learn a lot in doing all of this. Because we use the common protocol and shared infrastructure, we learn a lot about each single drug. Each regimen is actually an active drug and matching placebo, but we also learn a lot about ALS in general. So for example, we study biomarkers and other aspects of the disease, and we do so in a collaborative way, amplifying the learnings. If you can click one more time. So we have basically one protocol, one single governance structure, and IRB, which is the ethics committee that governs the trial. We have included 7 regimens so far, and we are enrolling at over 70 sites. So we are present in many states, many cities, both rural and urban settings, both big academic centers as well as small private practices. And we're really proud to bring the trial to over 70 locations in the US. And we have enrolled over 1,000 participants so far. Next slide. So this is really something, again, that happens nationwide. That's the list of sites on our website. We have a number of links for you to find if there is a site near you. And we are actually continuing to receive requests from sites, colleagues, investigators who have heard about the trial and want to bring the trial to their location. So hopefully we'll continue to add more sites. Next slide. So just to recap what we've done so far, we have completed testing of 4 regimens. Of these, 2 are not moving forward, and 2 are actually considering a phase 3 trial. And if you want to learn more about the details of all of this, we have plenty of recorded webinars. You can go on our website, and so you can learn about all of these drugs. And again, we shared a lot of information in the past, and it's all available publicly. So again, 2 drugs are not moving forward, 2 are, and we are happy that by using the trial as an efficient screening tool, using the platform trial as an efficient screening tool to basically gather data fast, we can then allow companies to move to the next step faster. At this time, we're still completing the analysis of the 5th regimen, regimen E, and we are enrolling new participants. So there's definitely hundreds of spots available if you're interested in participating in regimens F or G. We're also designing a couple of other regimens. So those are more for 2024. But right now, again, we are open enrolling, and we expect obviously new data to come out because we continue to analyze the previous regimens. We will be analyzing regimen E soon. And again, obviously for regimens F and G, we first have to complete enrollment. Next slide. Now, the issue is that not everyone can participate in the platform trial because there are eligibility criteria. So we are aware that many people living with ALS cannot take part in the trial. So what research options are available for people with ALS who cannot participate in clinical trials? Well, I would say that there are many research options specifically related to contributing data and samples for biomarker research, but there are now also options of receiving experimental drugs via something called expanded access, also known as compassionate use. This is an FDA-regulated mechanism for people that have a serious condition, such as ALS. And this particular path allows access to an investigational medical product, basically one of the drugs in the platform trial, for example, or other drugs that are still under investigation. And it has to be done in a certain way, but it is possible. The only issue is that it's still complex or expensive, and so far it has not really been available broadly in ALS, but that changed recently, and so I want to talk to you about this today. Next slide. First of all, just by way of definitions, expanded access is delivered by way of expanded access protocols, also known as EAPs. And for these protocols, either one patient is enrolled per study or a group of patients, or can be intermediate size or large. So we have seen all of these mechanisms in ALS. And again, we are actually spearheading many of these because we understand that people with ALS who do not qualify for trials may still want to have access to drugs and contribute to research by way of participating in EAPs. Next slide. So how did we start? Well, we started a few years ago, and I really want to give a shout out to all those community events, members, initiatives, people that really decided to think outside the box, to jumpstart EAPs at different locations and enable perhaps small programs or bigger programs at different locations through community events, whether it was a fundraiser, a golf tournament, or any other type of fundraising event that really enabled the field to change. And that has happened essentially over the last 3 or 4 years. I want to particularly highlight Tech versus ALS, which is a fantastic initiative that was started by a patient, Sean, who's in this picture. Please check out their website. It's a fantastic initiative for tech companies or other companies or groups that want to support an EAP center in their city, in their location. That's a fantastic way of jumpstarting EAPs. As I said earlier, essentially until 2019, there were no EAPs for ALS in ALS. I mean, it was very sporadic, very sparse, certainly not a possibility for most people. Since then, thanks to these champions who have been gathering community support in one way or another, we started to see change. Next slide. And so more recently, the Act for ALS, which is a new law that was signed into law at the end of 2021, with that act, we see now a new opportunity to expand access even further and to collect real-world data in parallel to clinical trials via EAPs. So this is a federally funded, so funded by the NIH and the government. It's an NIH funding mechanism. We actually were fortunate to receive the first grant via this mechanism last year. And this was to start a companion to the platform trial, specifically to regimen E, drug number 5, the one that is still sort of, we're basically completing the regimen right now, and we will share results with you as soon as available over the next few months. And this allowed people who could not qualify for the trial with access to have access to trials as part of this federally funded EAP. Next slide. So the multi-PIs or principal investigators of this particular EAP that's NIH funded are Dr. Babu, Dr. Barry, and myself. We're all here at the Healey Center. Next slide. And just to give you a sense of the scale of this, so in 2018, but really in 2019, we started to have a few single center, small, very small, maybe it was 1 patient or 2 patients, small EAPs that began here. Then in 2021, based on recommendations from the patient advisory committee to the platform trial, I want to really emphasize that it was the patients who asked us in 2020, 2021 to then export our experience as a single center to a few other centers of the platform trial. Then we started a small but mighty multi-center companion EAP at 9 sites across the US. We really selected the sites with the idea of having geographic distribution. We didn't want EAPs to be only available at one location, only at our hospital or in our area. So we really wanted to diversify that. And so in 2021, we began the small multi-center companion EAPs at 9 sites across the US. At that stage, it was fully funded by philanthropy. I want to emphasize that. We got a grant from IMALS. We got support from different foundations and people that helped. Again, as explained before, it was really the community support that allowed this new paradigm to even exist. And now in 2023, because we got the grant last year from the NIH, we were able to take this to new levels in terms of number of sites, because thanks to the grant from the NIH, we were able to expand to 25 sites, or planned. We are still opening up a few of the remaining sites, but right now, this EAP for this particular drug, for trehalose, is a reality at several locations in the US. Again, just to give you a sense, this was absolutely unheard of until very few years ago. And so looking ahead, we want to continue building on this and expanding and launching new EAPs. So we are certainly doing a lot of fundraising, and really thank you to initiatives like Tech versus ALS and other groups that are supporting the beginning, the launch of EAPs at their center. Tech versus ALS allowed the launch at Jefferson in Philadelphia. Accelerate ALS allowed the launch of an EAP site at UCI in Irvine, California. Again, it's fantastic to see how people really believe in this EAP method. They can really make a change and really enable their community to start this type of projects. And now we're applying for more grant funding. We're really working closely with many stakeholders and really hope to launch even more EAPs and more sites in the near future. Next slide. And this is just an idea of how this concept grew in ALS. Again, in 2018, we had one patient basically at MGH. And then in 2019, we started building more, but it was not until 2021, if you can click one more time, that we went to 9 different locations with this small multi-center EAP philanthropy funded program that tested 3 drugs that were part of the platform trial. And then if you can click one more time, that's where we are today, with many, many more sites participating in a variety of EAPs across the country. And obviously we want to continue to expand and bring this to even more sites. And all of these EAPs run in parallel to the efficacy trial. So this is a very important concept, and I really want to emphasize this. At the same locations that you can see on the map, people with ALS who qualify for the platform trial participate in the platform trial so that we can test the efficacy of those drugs. At the same locations, people who are not eligible for the trial are given the opportunity to access the drug via EAP. Now, because we're doing this in parallel, meaning at exactly the same time as we run the different regimens, the conclusions of a regimen will dictate what happens to the expanded access. In other words, this is a companion to the parent efficacy trial. So as we learn the results of the efficacy trial, if those are negative, the EAP also will close. If those are positive, the EAP will continue. And the reason I'm saying this is because one of the small EAPs that was initially done, actually the very first that we did at more than one location, was an EAP of verdiperstat. That was one of the regimens in the platform trial, regimen B. And the regimen, unfortunately, had negative results. And this is why that particular EAP is now closed. Now, for the next 2 EAPs, CNM, AU8, and predopidine, those were tested as part of regimen C and D, respectively, of the platform trial. Those studies, as I said, had results such as the companies are now bringing these compounds to the next phase of testing. So those EAPs are still available. In terms of trehalose, obviously, that's regimen E, or the 5th regimen in the platform trial. As I said earlier, we don't have the results of that yet. So obviously, it's still very much, active. And we will decide what to do with this EAP once we have the results of the parent trial, the efficacy trial. Next slide. So just to give you an idea, these EAPs, the one that's funded by the Act for ALS at 25 sites, run in parallel to the regimen, is actually run with the same level of rigor and robustness as the parent efficacy trial. This is because we are actually doing research. We are not just providing access, but we are collecting important research data from this program. That's why the slide here shows all the different stakeholders that are participating in the Trial's EAP. So it's not just a simple access program, it's actually a research trial where we collect safety, clinical, and biomarker data from all participants with the same level of rigor as the original trial. Next slide. And so just to give you a general idea of the timelines, as I said earlier, we received the grant in 2022. So we did start up in Q4 in the last quarter of 2022, and then in the first quarter of this year, 2023, we started enrollment as planned in the first quarter of 2023, and we are now over 50% enrolled. We're doing quite well, but there are still a few spots available in case you're interested and live near a Trial's EAP site. And we're going to continue to follow these participants. Obviously, once we know the results of regimen E or the platform trial that's actually testing the efficacy of Trial's, we will need to decide what to do with expanded access. If the trial is negative, this expanded access will come to an end as well. If the trial is positive, obviously there will be more excitement and interest in expanding this EAP. Next slide. And so if with any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to our patient navigation team. We will continue to have these webinars, although we won't be here next week because we will be traveling to a conference. It's the National NIS Consortium Conference, and we will be back on October 12th. And with that, I think we can stop sharing the slides. And there was a couple of comments. Actually, somebody caught a typo. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry. There was a typo on one of the slides. The name predopidine was not spelled correctly, so thank you for catching that. And the question specifically is about predopidine, which was tested as regimen D, as in David, of the platform trial, and is also one of our expanded access protocols. So what is the effect of predopidine? Well, predopidine was shown in the trial to have positive effects on speech production. And so I know that we have a webinar. I don't know, Catherine, if you have it handy, or maybe you can help us search. But basically, we have a recording with all the results. We have couple of webinars where we discuss the results of the regimen D or the predopidine regimen. But essentially, in a nutshell, what was seen was that there seemed to be a positive impact on speech production. That's something that we definitely want to follow up on. That's why I said the data collected in the platform trial support the advancement of predopidine to a phase 3 trial. And so hopefully that will happen over the next few months so that we can really confirm the effect on speech and other parameters that were also seen. But again, we have all the details in one of our previous webinars. And then a question that we often get, and I see here that, thank you, Catherine, for posting the some information about regimen D. So a question that I often get is, what's the first step for someone considering an EAP? And maybe, Catherine, do you want to take that?
So I was actually going to echo that really is a common question we get, is because these programs are so new in so many different regions where they never existed before, is, how do you even get involved in this? If you've, heard about it through the grapevine, what's next? And I don't have the answer, but when I speak to people who have that initial question, it's, typically I encourage people to start where they receive clinical care for ALS. If it's something that, if your local clinic or your providing neurologist is interested in doing that, that's a conversation worth having. If you don't have resources set up locally, then kind of looking toward any neighboring sites that are involved in research, or if there's, that map that Dr. Paganoni showed earlier, if there's a site kind of near you that's involved in expanded access, reaching out to that team directly and seeing, what that pathway looks like and if there might be opportunities. But I'll hand it back to Dr. Paganoni to elaborate.
Yeah, no, I agree. First point of contact is always the site, and then obviously our patient navigator is available to answer questions as well. And I see a raised hand. If you have a question, please type it in the Q&A box if possible. So we'll be happy to take it. There's a great question about biomarker collection. So I guess the question is, who decides what biomarkers are collected? Well, it's really, who decides that? Well, it really depends a little bit on how the EAP is set up. Right now, for the NIH-funded EAP and the larger scale EAPs that we hope to do soon, those biomarker data are really determined by the principal investigators of the study in consultation with the drug manufacturer and other stakeholders such as the NIH. So essentially, there is a grant application process where a certain set of data is proposed or biomarkers are proposed, and so then based the results of the grant, etc., those biomarkers will be collected. It varies a little bit because it depends on the mechanism of action of the drug. I will say that neurofilament levels are kind of a must these days in ALS, and because they are relevant to ALS in general. But then depending on the specific mechanism of action, there may be a specific biomarker that makes sense for the particular EAP. And in the earlier programs, one note I want to make, so the large EAPs funded by the NIH tend to be more expensive than the small EAPs that we started a few years ago. And I want to be super clear that the goal of these new EAPs, so to speak, compared to the old ones, is different. So the goal of the new EAPs is actual research. So that means more extensive biomarker data, more extensive data collection in general, because again, the goal is research, not just access. And there's a question about sort of the expanded access for regimens F and G. So we continue to be in conversations with the drug manufacturers of F and G. And as of right now, due to a series of reasons, these drugs being new and the companies still kind of developing their own policy about expanded access, we don't have a specific timeline for those, but we're certainly in conversations with them. And in fact, I will say that we plan on, I think this question was asked last time each of the two companies was on this webinar as guest speakers, and we plan on bringing them back in the fall, between October and November. So representatives from either Carico or Denali will be here again as guest speakers. So don't miss that, and you can definitely ask them directly live to see if they have made progress on that. In terms of when someone is in a trial, when are they informed of the findings from the trial? That's a great question. So there's actually not a rule or a specific regulation about it. What I can tell you is that first of all, we don't have results until the entire trial is over. So it's not so much, so the anchor point is not individual participation, but is completion of the entire trial. So after the entire trial has been completed, there are some requirements about posting some of the results on clinicaltrials.gov and some timelines for that. And then for the trials that we design and we manage, we really make it a point to let the participants know all the findings. In fact, when we share the results of the previous regimens in the platform trial, so and actually Katrin, I think, has put some links to some of the webinar recordings about the results of some of these trials. We had, prior to the public webinar, we actually had a webinar with just the study participants. So we actually invite everyone who participated in the trial to get to know the results and have a chance to ask questions. So question, is the expanded access part of the phase 2 trial? So that's a great question. No, it's separate. So I don't want to conflate the two. So there is the platform trial, which is a phase 2/3 trial. That's the parent trial, that's the efficacy trial, and that keeps going. And really the goal of that is to enroll people who meet criteria to test and determine as quickly as possible whether a certain drug is effective in slowing down ALS. Now, the EAP is a companion, so we do it in parallel. It's not necessarily integrated in the trial, but the data collected is collected with the same level of rigor. So potentially kind of, after the trial is completed, the results are, can be leveraged. In terms of the HEALES EAP, which is the one that's open right now and actively enrolling participants as part of the EAP companion to the platform trial, the treatment is for 24 weeks. So the question was how many weeks can one be in the HEALES EAP trial, and that's 24 weeks. And I see questions about specific sites. So somebody's saying, Houston is not on the map. So absolutely. I mean, I think it's obviously we work closely with clinics in Houston, and so I think we it would be good to express your interest, and I think I'll make sure to relay that as well. In fact, we're meeting next week with everyone at the national conference, and so I expect that there will be more EAP opportunities. So the fact that if you are disappointed that your specific site is not on the map, I mean, I do expect more EAPs to become available at more sites. So it would be great to really expand the number of sites. And so feel free to let your investigator or your physician know that you might be interested. And so hopefully there will be an opportunity to also include them. I do want to emphasize that, the community fundraisers and initiatives like Tech versus ALS really help sites jumpstart their participation in the EAP. Sometimes a site has not participated yet simply because they don't have the staffing or resources. They don't have the people to do the work. And so if there is a local fundraiser that can specifically allow a site, a clinic, to hire extra people to work on the EAPs, that's a great place to start, because that will be a way for the particular site to have finally the resources to add EAPs to their portfolio. So, a great question. There's another question again about regimens F and G, and as I said earlier, we don't have EAPs for those, but we expect that the things may change, and so please feel free to ask again when the representatives from regimens F and G come back as guest speakers. We hope that will be available soon. In terms of when can someone enroll in the expanded access, I didn't really emphasize the point on one of the first slides, but per FDA regulations, the population that enrolls in EAP has to be different from the population that's eligible for the trial. So if someone finishes a trial but is still technically eligible for other trials, unfortunately, EAPs are not a good option because, again, there are some specific regulations to ensure that EAPs do not compete or do not interfere with the efficacy trials. So that's, again, per FDA regulations. However, if somebody completes a trial, for example, completes a regimen or the platform trial, and at that point is no longer eligible for the platform trial or another trial, then the EAP will become an option at that point. So it's not so much a matter of timing, it's actually mostly about eligibility. So there's a question about the recent press release from CNM-EU8, which participated in regimen C of the platform trial. And so there's been more analysis. We continue to learn from the previous regimens. And so I do want to emphasize that, we really accumulated a large amount of data. We share the top line results and the first results right away, but please be sure that to know that we are actively analyzing data and continuing to analyze the data. And so there's some long-term survival benefits that we're seeing in more updated analysis. And so I think it's actually a testament to the fact that we can learn a lot from the trial, not just from the randomized control trial, but also from more long-term analysis. And there is an EAP for CNM-EU8 currently open. So obviously for people who are not eligible for the trial, there will be another option. So I think we took all questions tonight, am I right? So thank you so much for your interest. And again, it was many people asked us to present on EAPs, and we're happy to bring this back. I think we do have another EAP webinar scheduled, I believe, for later on in the fall with a colleague of mine. And so again, we're always happy to provide you with news, and please let us know if you have any additional questions. And so again, we're not going to be here next week, but certainly the following week. Thank you so much. Thank you.